My name is Lisa. Sitting in a small cafe in Asheville, I'm waiting for Vivian. The air is thick with a sense of anticipation, and memories of the past few days flood my mind. Just a short while ago, Vivian walked in, her eyes wide with surprise and disbelief. She slid into the seat across from me, the confidence that usually radiates from her replaced by an obvious tension. "I can't believe this," she said, her voice tight and strained. "What you did? Do you have any idea what you've caused?" I took a deep breath, maintaining an even tone. "I understand the impact, Vivian. That's why I moved carefully, ensuring every step was within my rights and fully documented." Her hands clenched around her coffee cup, the knuckles turning white. "Within your rights? You withdrew everything. You destabilized the firm. Employees are panicking. Clients are leaving. How could you be so cold?" I met her gaze calmly. "I didn't act out of malice. I acted because boundaries matter. I've been invisible in the decisions that depended on me. Overlooked despite my contributions. You underestimated the role I played and assumed my silence meant consent. It didn't." Vivian's voice cracked slightly, a mix of frustration and recognition in her eyes. "You think this is about proving a point, about revenge?" I shook my head firmly. "No, it's about accountability. It's about showing that actions have consequences and that confidence unchecked by awareness can lead to failure." She leaned back, a sharp exhale escaping her lips. I could see the realization settling in, the weight of her oversight pressing down on her. For the first time, the arrogance I had witnessed for years was faltering under the tangible results of her misjudgment. As I sit here, I'm reminded of how it all began. Vivian and I come from a well-to-do family in Charlotte. Our parents, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, are prominent figures in the local business community. My father is a shrewd and driven man, always focused on expanding his business empire. My mother, on the other hand, is more concerned with social status and maintaining a perfect image. Vivian, 3 years older than me, has always been the apple of our parents' eyes. She's charming, confident, and has a natural talent for business. I, on the other hand, have always been the quiet one, more interested in numbers and analysis. Despite my skills, I've often been overshadowed by Vivian. One sunny Sunday, I received an invitation from Vivian to a brunch at the country club. She claimed it was to introduce me to her newborn daughter. As I pulled into the parking lot, the warm sun bathed the area, and the familiar hum of Sunday brunch traffic mixed with distant laughter from the patio. I went there expecting polite smiles and the usual undercurrent of competitiveness that always seemed to follow Vivian. The moment I stepped into the dining room, I felt the tension. Vivian was hovering near the high chair, her posture rigid, and her eyes scanning the room like a general inspecting her troops. When she saw me approach, her face tightened. She held her baby protectively, and the warmth I'd hoped to offer vanished under her cold glare. "Don't touch my baby. You are disgusting," she snapped, her voice sharp enough to draw a few looks. The words hit me like a cold gust, and I was stunned into silence. I realized that any attempt to explain myself would only make the situation worse. So, I stepped back slightly, forcing a polite smile and keeping my hands at my sides. The baby, oblivious to the tension, cooed softly and reached out to me with tiny fingers. A twinge of sadness cut through my shock. Vivian's glare hardened, making it clear that my presence was not only unwelcome but offensive to her. For the rest of the brunch, I sat quietly at the edge of the table, watching as Vivian dominated every topic. Her voice was confident and her laughter was light, but there was an edge of control to it. I felt the familiar sting of being underestimated, not just by her but by the family who seemed to let it happen. As I drove back to Asheville, the quiet hum of the tires on the highway was a backdrop to the storm in my mind. I kept replaying Vivian's words over and over. "You are disgusting." Those words hurt more than any insult I could remember because they came from someone who was supposed to know me. I thought about all the times I had supported her. I had helped with investments, covered gaps in her decisions, and kept quiet when her mistakes could have cost the firm clients. But in her eyes, none of it mattered. I was filled with a mix of anger and guilt. Why did I let her words hurt me so deeply? Why did I still care about her opinion after years of being dismissed? As I drove, I pondered whether I should let this slide and maintain the facade of civility or if it was finally time to assert myself. By the time I reached the familiar streets of Asheville, I knew I needed a plan. A plan that would give me leverage while keeping my conscience intact. Back in my apartment, I pulled up the spreadsheets I had quietly maintained over the past few years. I was not just a passive investor in Vivian's boutique investment firm. I had always monitored the numbers, tracked the cash flow, and noticed how dependent the company had become on my capital. That night, in the dim light of my desk lamp, I finally saw the full picture. The firm was over-leveraged. Several pending deals hinged on lines of credit I controlled. A single withdrawal on my part could trigger delays, missed payments, and a scramble to cover obligations. The realization sent a shiver through me, not out of malice but from the weight of responsibility. I held more influence than I had ever admitted to myself, and the temptation to use it was almost overwhelming. As I analyzed the accounts, I thought about Vivian's arrogance. She assumed her control was absolute, and her confidence was unshakable. She had never anticipated that I was quietly steering critical parts of her business. Every projection I ran confirmed that my investment was not just a contribution, it was a lever that could shift the entire firm. I leaned back in my chair, conflicted. The excitement of having power clashed with my ethical hesitation. Could I justify using this leverage as a response to her cruelty? Or would I cross a line I couldn't come back from? I spent hours reviewing every pending deal and every line item that depended on me. My decision was forming slowly and deliberately. I needed clarity, certainty, and a plan with no room for error. By the time the city lights of Asheville blurred past my window, I had mapped out the contours of the influence I held. The path forward was narrow but clear. The next morning, I started reaching out to my trusted financial advisors, being careful to keep the calls discreet. Each conversation was precise and measured, leaving no room for misunderstanding. I explained my intentions without emotion, framing the withdrawal as a routine portfolio adjustment. But beneath the calm tone, I felt a familiar churn of anticipation and apprehension. Legal counsel followed. I needed the withdrawal to be executed flawlessly, with every document verified and every procedure airtight. There was no margin for error, especially since Vivian's firm was so dependent on my investment. My lawyer advised me on timelines, potential complications, and the subtle nuances of contractual obligations. As the day went on, small complications emerged. The bank requested additional verification on a few transactions, and a minor error in one document required resubmission. Each delay felt like a stretched-out heartbeat, a reminder that control was never absolute. I resisted the urge to rush, keeping my voice calm and my mind focused. Between calls, I reviewed Vivian's public filings, tracking her recent deals and noting where the timing of my withdrawal would have the most impact. I imagined her confidence slowly cracking as she faced unexpected obstacles. But I pushed that thought aside, reminding myself that my goal was not humiliation but balance and assertion. By evening, everything was in motion. My advisors were aligned, the paperwork was nearly complete, and I had rehearsed the timing of each step with meticulous attention. The tension in my chest had shifted from anxiety to a steady vigilance. Every decision carried weight, and every action was a ripple that could reshape the firm and my relationship with Vivian forever. I arrived at the Charlotte networking event early and took a seat near the back. Vivian was already there, laughing loudly, shaking hands with clients, and commanding attention as if the room belonged to her. She carried herself with a confidence that bordered on arrogance, and people deferred to her opinions without question. As the presentations began, Vivian dismissed any mention of potential market risks. She waved off concerns about over-leveraged accounts and upcoming deals, insisting that everything was under control. Her words were casual, and her tone was light, but the underlying hubris was obvious. She truly believed nothing could threaten her grasp on the firm. I sat quietly, taking mental notes. Every shrug and every dismissive comment reinforced what I already knew. Her overconfidence left gaps I could exploit. If I acted with precision, I could contrast her impulsive behavior with my own careful, deliberate strategy. By the time the networking hour ended, I had mapped out the most opportune moments to proceed. I left the event unnoticed, blending into the crowd, my mind focused on the next steps. Vivian remained oblivious to the quiet storm forming just beyond her awareness. The morning in Asheville was crisp as I sat at my desk, ready to execute the withdrawal of my investment from Vivian's firm. After weeks of planning and double-checking every detail, it was finally time. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, a mix of satisfaction and hesitation swirling inside me. I started with the transfer forms, carefully filling out every field to ensure accuracy. A minor error flagged by the bank required a phone call and resubmission, but I remained composed. Each step had been anticipated, and I navigated the minor obstacles with the calm patience I had rehearsed. As the funds moved out, I watched the numbers update in real time. The firm's balance reflected the shift immediately, and a quiet thrill ran through me. This was more than a financial maneuver, it was a statement, a reclaiming of authority that had been invisible for too long. But alongside the satisfaction came guilt, a reminder that family ties were complicated and power could wound even when used carefully. I pictured Vivian, confident as ever, completely unaware of the impact that was already unfolding. Her impulsive optimism would soon collide with the reality I had engineered, and I had to resist the urge to check in. Patience was essential. By late afternoon, all the paperwork had been confirmed, every document verified, and the transfer finalized. I leaned back in my chair, a deep exhale of tension escaping me. The plan was complete, and now it was out of my hands. The next morning, I checked my phone, expecting only routine updates. But what I received confirmed the shift I had anticipated. Notifications from financial news outlets, murmurs in professional circles, and internal alerts from the firm all pointed to the same reality: Vivian's company was experiencing immediate liquidity strain. The first emails leaked internally, expressing concerns about payroll, unsettled transactions, and delayed contracts. Staff members who had once looked to her with unquestioning confidence were now questioning their own security. Calls to clients went unanswered as front-line managers tried to manage the chaos. I could almost hear the frantic energy building in Charlotte through the pattern of alerts. Vivian's initial attempts to reassure investors and employees fell flat. Her usual charm and decisiveness couldn't mask the tangible disruption caused by the sudden withdrawal. Reports were late, deals were paused, and the sense of control she had projected so flawlessly was fracturing under the weight of reality. For the first time, the arrogance I had witnessed at the networking event had real consequences. I monitored silently, resisting the urge to interfere. The distance gave me perspective. This was no longer about personal vindication. It was about observing the structural fragility I had long known existed. As the day went on, the tension in me grew as alerts continued to cascade. Emails with urgent subject lines, client calls bouncing, and employees whispering behind closed doors were all signs that the first ripple of my action had become a wave. By the afternoon, it was clear that the firm's stability was under serious threat. Vivian's confident facade had cracked, and her usual control was slipping. I watched as the realization settled over her, heavy and unrelenting. Now, sitting here in the cafe, I know that the lessons of this experience will shape how I approach both my personal and professional life. I've learned that patience, preparation, and principled action matter more than loud protests or emotional outbursts. Power is not in domination but in understanding leverage, boundaries, and the impact of one's choices. As I leave the cafe, I'm ready to embrace the next chapter of my life, independent, deliberate, and unwavering. I'll continue to build on these lessons, ensuring that the future reflects both the strength of my choices and the boundaries I've fought to establish.